And I can get started whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Yeah, if you all want to just quickly introduce yourselves, just so our neighbors know who's talking, that would be great.
Sure. I'm Mike Cechvala. I'm a transportation planner for the city. I work very closely with Metro. Yeah, Reuben, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Reuben Sanon. I am one of the deputy mayors and I work with Metro as part of my portfolio with the mayor's office. I don't think we have anybody else from the city here except Alder Revere. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, we don't have too many people here. Did we want to just do a quick go around, or do we want to get started? I assume you all know each other.
Yeah, sure. I can introduce myself just so y'all know who you're talking to. So I'm Eli. I am the current president of the Campus Area Neighborhood Association.
Yes, hello, I am Cleo and I am the vice president of the Campus Area Neighborhood Association.
Hi, I'm Momo. I'm a senior and I just joined Canada this past semester.
Hi all, and I'm Mike Revere from the Madison City Council. Thanks for putting this on for us, Eli, and thanks Mike and Reuben for being here.
Great. I think that's everybody. If not, go ahead and jump on. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let me know if you have trouble seeing the presentation. So this is the transit network redesign. The basic goal of this project is to design a route system that will better meet the needs of the Madison area residents and businesses. So when we talk about the transit network, that's basically the routes. So where they go, where they go, what streets do they follow, and so forth. And then the schedule that goes with them. So most importantly, how often do they run? So not all routes are the same. Some routes run frequently, like the 80 and the 84. Some routes operate very infrequently, like once an hour or something. So that's basically the entire network. It's a ground up approach. We have a website there at the bottom, mymetrobus.com/redesign. There are a handful of things that instituted this planning work. One is bus rapid transit. I'll talk about that in a second, but bus rapid transit essentially replaces the core of the system, the most heavily used routes. And so if we didn't do anything, we'd still have to redesign a lot of the network to reduce duplication between local routes and BRT, and then make the connections between local routes and BRT. So we'd be touching a good, probably half the system anyway. The other issue is that we've had over the years many requests for new service. The city is growing, complaints about long travel times and things like that. So we thought it would be a good time to address those issues and try to do something about it and make a better network overall. And then lastly, of course, the pandemic, we reduced service substantially. And so when we bring back service, we don't want to just bring it back the way it was. We want to think about how we bring it back and bring back the service in a smarter way. So all those things kind of led to this project. Some key project assumption, it's comprehensive. We're basically assuming the existing routes and schedules don't exist. And so we're building it up from scratch. This is fairly important. We're assuming the same total pre-pandemic service hours. So essentially that we'll have the same level of service in 2023 as we had in 2019. So we've reduced service and we think we'll bring it back to the same level. One point, I think we were hoping to increase service, but now I think we're basically planning to restore the same amount of service. We're assuming BRT will be in place, and then we're assuming that most local routes will not use the BRT infrastructure. Some other project goals, simplifying service. We hear often that it's too complicated. There are too many overlapping routes. Reduce travel times, increase ridership, reduce vehicle miles traveled, improve service for served and disadvantaged communities, and complement the BRT system. So a little brief history of the existing transit network. The transfer point system was implemented in 1998, which relied on pulse transfers at 4 transfer points in order to provide connections in peripheral Madison. There's a commuter overlay network during peak periods in order to provide sufficient capacity and frequency during that 8 to 5 morning and afternoon commute. Service was reduced significantly in early 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. Most of that commuter overlay network is what we removed. It's not quite that simple, but that overlay network of commuter service is mostly what came down as people were no longer commuting to their downtown jobs. Although we're starting to see that demand come back now. Some service is funded by partner agencies, so not all of it is funded by the city of Madison. The city of Madison, with the Common Council and its transportation boards, the Transportation Policy and Planning Board and the Transportation Commission, have pretty strong control over the service hours that are funded by the city. We don't have a lot of control over, for example, the routes like the 80 series routes that are serving the UW campus. We work closely with the UW to plan and provide that service. But then we also have valuable partners in the region, the cities of Middleton, city of Fitchburg, city of Sun Prairie, city of Verona. So we need to keep that in mind. We can't necessarily trade service hours from one community to the other, because that would result in cost increases or decreases to those communities or the city of Madison. So a service hour is really the currency that we're working with here. A bus service hour is 1 bus in service for 1 hour. We had about 450,000 annual service hours pre-pandemic. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking those and shaking them up and rearranging them in different ways to provide better service at the same cost. Okay. So this is it. This is the pre-COVID service network. You know, some of these commuter routes and other routes have been changed and reduced. But one thing to look at with this is just it's very complicated. The existing network was very complicated. It has many overlapping routes. Different routes operated at different times of the day. Different routes operated on different days of the week, so weekends, and weekdays, and Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes the route would go one way, and sometimes it would go a different way. Generally speaking, no routes ran every 15 minutes or better throughout the day. So it's a very much a pile of low frequency routes. This made it very confusing and hard for people to use. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about bus rapid transit, because this is key to this project. Bus rapid transit is a combination of improvements along a transit corridor, direct routes with fewer stops, frequent all-day service, bus-only lanes, branded stations and buses, transit signal priority, and faster fare payment. We're essentially trying to bring in some of the benefits of projects like light rail, streetcar, commuter rail. It's kind of in that family of premium transit products. This is the BRT map. So the primary BRT line that we'll be implementing in 2024 will be the red line. So the east-west line. So it'll go basically all the way from the west side of Madison to the east side of Madison. Junction Road, just past Westtown to Easttown Mall. And then at Easttown, it will actually continue. Some buses will go to Sun Prairie and some will go up towards the American Center area. We've decided that with the Red Line BRT project, we're going to go ahead and install the service for 2 other BRT lines. So the north-south green line will be on Park Street and either Sherman or Packers going from the north side to the south side and back. And then this blue line, which will shore up service and improve frequency in the core near west side of the BRT corridor along University Avenue, and then continue out to Middleton. So that's kind of our starting point with building the network. Is we're kind of starting with this backbone, this kind of basic structure of the BRT system being in place. And then the transit network redesign is kind of about every other route, basically. How does every other route work in the system, and how do we leverage the benefits of BRT to bring them to the rest of the city? Oops. This is what bus rapid transit will look like. Our shelters, this is more of a generic shelters, or I should update this picture, but they'll often operate in the middle of the street. So they'll drive on the left instead of the right. They'll often have bus only lanes, and this is Mineral Point Road, for example. So fewer stops, more direct routes. Electric buses, most of the fleet will be electric. Not all of the BRT fleet will be electric, but most of it will be. Yeah, combination of other improvements along the BRT corridor. So that'll be the kind of the backbone. So for the rest of the system, what we're focused on now is a concept that's pretty important that I'm going to try to explain. There are basically two things that transit systems can do for us. One is the goal of increasing ridership. We can concentrate transit service onto fewer routes with more frequent service, ultimately increasing ridership. And then the other thing that the transit service can do for us is provide a basic level of transportation for people who rely on it. And that goal is called the coverage goal. So coverage extends transit service to as many people as possible with more routes, but the cost is frequency. So a coverage oriented system has more routes, but less frequent service. The bus comes less often. Here's a graphical illustration of a ridership based network. This background picture is a fictional city with streets. You have busy streets that are densely populated with people and jobs and everything else. And then you have more neighborhood streets. So a ridership oriented system would concentrate all the service onto the busy, dense corridors. Buses would often drive in straight lines as opposed to meandering through neighborhoods, and the buses would run very frequently because you've put all of your transit resources onto a handful of corridors. A coverage network looks more like this. You're spreading service more thinly. You have more routes going more places. And so more people have access to the system, but none of the routes operate frequently. So the problem is that these are competing goals. Whatever your budget is, whatever your resources that you're working with, you have to kind of decide how much of the system is going to be oriented towards ridership and how much is going to be oriented towards coverage. I mentioned we're trying to build back up to 2019 levels of service. If we had less service or if we had more service, we would still have to answer this basic question before designing the system. And that's the basic question that we're asking now. So we have a handful of factors that can go into how we design the routes. And I'll kind of go into some of those details. This is a map showing estimates of boardings at bus stops. I think this is actually, they're conglomerated into intersections, but anyway, so this shows us where people are riding the bus. These pink circles here are the transfer points. So although we do have a lot of people boarding buses there, a lot of them are just transferring. So that's why we note those. If they didn't have to transfer, then they wouldn't be making those transfers. But anyway, so this is one factor that tells us where transit service should possibly go. One thing that frequently comes up that we're well aware of is, well, what if there's demand, but the transit service is so poor that nobody's using it? So we can look at land use. So what generates transit rides are people that are going places. On the origin side of that, it's residential density. So we can plot the density around Madison for residential. And then we can also plot for the destination side, we can plot jobs. Employment is not the only reason people ride transit, but it's a metric that we can measure quite easily and map the density of. So it's kind of a stand-in for destinations. We know that people travel for education and for healthcare and shopping and all kinds of other things, but jobs are much easier to plot on maps. So this is kind of the other way to look at demand. And then the other thing that really factors into this is the street network. So we need to drive our buses on streets. We can't drive on any street. We need to drive on streets that are wide enough and built solidly enough to support buses. We have a handful of barriers. Freeways are difficult for us to deal with most of the time. Obviously, Madison has bodies of water. I'm sure we're all familiar with those. And a lot of these street networks are not as connected and gridded as they could be, which would make it easier for us to make some connections. So we have to work within the street network. Equity is a major driver. We can plot not only the density of people, but we can plot where people of color are more likely to live, people with low incomes, and people without cars available. So that's one thing to notice on that particular thing is that a lot of the needs for transit are on Madison's peripheral area. A lot of them these neighborhoods are difficult to serve because of freeways and road networks and things like that. A lot of these people are not going downtown, they're going everywhere. So that's what we're trying to kind of accomplish with this project, is making it better for people, reduce travel times throughout the city and so forth. So with that, we sat down with our transit consultant, where we've hired Jarrett Walker and Associates, who is a renowned worldwide transit consultant. They've done work on several continents. So we're excited to have them in Madison. And so they have put together maps that show what a coverage-based map would look like and what a ridership map would look like. And we'll use those as starting points to design the final network. So I'm going to introduce this concept with the existing transit system. This is the existing network. You will notice that the routes are color coded. The red lines are routes that operate frequently, every 15 minutes or better. The blue lines are routes that operate every 30 minutes. So routes that operate every 30 minutes are sort of, they're not exactly frequent, but they're not terrible either. And then the light blue lines that are barely visible on this map are routes that run every 60 minutes, every hour. These are the midday frequencies. So usually it's a little better during rush hour and it's a little worse on evenings and weekends. But this is key because it shows not only where the routes go, but also the frequency or the relative quality of the service of those routes. So now we'll go to the ridership map. One thing you'll notice is that the BRT system is represented as Route A. The east-west line is Route A. The north-south line is Route B. So those routes operate more frequently. They operate every 15 minutes. So we go from a system that has next to no frequent service to a system that has quite a lot of frequent service. Besides the BRT system, we also have this D route and the C route that run every 15 minutes. And then essentially everything else is every 30 minutes. So there's no hourly service on this map at all middays. It's all either frequent or decent levels of service. Most of these routes are radial, meaning they go downtown, except for Route G, which kind of does this orbital pattern from East Town through the east side, through the south side, along the Beltline corridor and into the far west side. So that's the ridership map. This is the coverage map. So the coverage map looks a lot more like our existing network. We have the BRT system here still. The A line goes east-west, the B line goes north-south. And then we have a handful of routes that operate every 30 to 60 minutes. And the frequencies kind of drop off, typically more in the periphery. We still have this orbital route G that goes around the outside of Madison. One thing to notice too on these maps is that the ridership map does not include transfer points because there are much fewer routes. We don't have this system where we have many infrequent routes coming in, making connections, and then going out. You really never have any situation here where more than two routes intersect. One exception to that is perhaps this near East Side area where the D, G, and C lines come together, and then downtown, of course. But coverage, we maintain the transfer points. Again, because we have more routes that are less frequent, we need to have them come into a point, make their connections between the buses, and then leave. So some key outcomes from the two maps. Ridership. So what we can measure here is how far you can get in 45 minutes. And not so much how far can you get, but from any given point, how many jobs or destinations can you access within that 45-minute trip. And so we can do that for any single point, and then we can do it for all points in Madison and put together some summary results. The ridership map more than doubles how many jobs the average Madison resident can get to in 45 minutes. So that's a key outcome of this. The number of jobs that you can access in 45 minutes on average doubles because the routes are running more frequently, they're going more places more directly. But the downside is people within a walk distance of a bus stop, which we often call proximity, drops from 79% with the existing system to 67%. On coverage, we slightly increased the number of people within walk distance of a bus stop from 79% to 81%. So more people would have access to the system. And we would increase the number of jobs that the average Madison resident can get to, but not nearly as much as the ridership system. So we can, compared to the existing system, we can, in any scenario, we can make improvements just by changing things. The BRT system does a lot of that, but it kind of depends on what our priorities are as to what's more important. Oops, that's from a different presentation. So next steps, we will be seeking direction on the ridership coverage split. We had a public meeting yesterday. We have a survey out. So if you could go to that website, mymetrobus.com/redesign, there is a survey at the top that you can take. Tell us your opinion. We will be taking this to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board on October 4th and asking them for their guidance. Ultimately, this coverage ridership trade-off is a policy decision. As staff and designers, we can design either. It really comes down to a policy decision. Final network design will happen towards the end of this year, ultimately with a plan approved in early 2022. We'll begin implementing the new transit system between 22 and 23. Typically, we do major service changes in August. So August 22, I'm envisioning perhaps we can do some of the easier to implement changes and try to get everything done by the end of 23. Some of these changes will involve a lot of rescheduling, changes to bus stops, infrastructure. We might need a traffic signal or two and things like that. So some of these things might take a little bit of time to implement. The BRT infrastructure will be complete in 2024. So essentially what's going to happen is we're going to implement the BRT system early with normal metro buses serving normal metro stops. And then there will be some construction. And then essentially the new electric buses will replace the old buses. They're not old buses, but the normal buses. And then the BRT stations will replace the normal Metro bus stops in 24. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to go back through any of it or answer any questions. Again, the website's there, so I'll just leave that up in case you haven't written it down yet. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the comprehensive presentation. I'll stop the recording there.